I see what you're doing and I applaud the effort. I hope that the policy conversations will continue, but please don't pass this bylaw as it currently stands.
And it doesn't even stop the protests last week. All it means is that you can't call me a while I walk down the street.
We suspect that the proposed amendment to bylaw 13-050 may impact the right of free expression as protected in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Trans lives will always matter in all circumstances. For a better world, we will have to make together or not at all.
It's a bylaw passed by a municipality which tries to regulate private conversations. That's how far it goes.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Kitchener, Ontario. And folks, what can I tell you? The war on freedom of speech and freedom of assembly continues. I'm at the Waterloo Region Council meeting, and they are actually discussing a bylaw, 13-050, that will severely limit freedom of expression. Now, here's the deal. The councillors are going to be voting on a bylaw that's very similar to one that's already in place in Edmonton, and it is going to prohibit any communication, word, sign, or gesture on publicly owned property that makes persons who identify as LGBT feel, quote, harassed, offended, or troubled, end quote. So this means that bylaw officers can remove offenders, and not only that, give them a parting gift of a $250 fine. So translation, remember the 1 million March for Children demonstration that happened last week? Well, folks, under this bylaw, if it passes, that would be an illegal gathering, that those parents voicing their opinions regarding indoctrination over education would be told to leave under threat of trespass and potentially receive a $250 fine each. And the bitter irony, of course, is that they are protesting on property that would be Region of Waterloo property that is ultimately funded by the taxpayer. It's public property. It is absolutely outrageous. But not only is this bylaw, if it is passed, egregious, it would appear that it infringes upon the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I speak of some specific sections, namely 2A, freedom of conscience and religion, 2B, freedom of expression, 2C, freedom of peaceful assembly, and 2D, freedom of association. Now, after about 2 hours, the meeting adjourned. And here's the funny thing. Here's why my cameraman Lincoln J and I are in the lobby of the Region of Waterloo headquarters and not in the council chambers. And it's because the chair, Karen Redmond, for some reason, said that there was to be no more recording of the proceedings, even by accredited members of the media. So I would suggest, I got a funny feeling here, folks. I think Chair Redmond is sending a signal that she's gung-ho for this bylaw prohibiting taxpayers from going on publicly funded properties to voice their opinions, if she's already telling everybody in attendance to holster their cell phones and telling the media to holster their recording devices. Again, absolutely outrageous. The attack on our press freedom, speech freedom, freedom to gather, freedom to assembly, it just continues unabated. But fortunately, before the ban was enforced on recording devices, my cameraman Lincoln J recorded the delegations who are both for and against this censorious bylaw. Let's check out what they had to say.
My name is Julia Malott, and I am transgender. I am a parent, and I am a member of this community. I have been told that these amendments are not intended to limit protest, that they are intended to combat Islamophobia. That is an amiable cause, as there are many recommendations in the March 2022 report that laud to this endeavor. But good legislation is cognizant not just to what it intends to do, but also what it is capable of doing. Canada has robust hate speech laws under sections 318 and 319 of the Criminal Code, which hold a relatively high bar for restricted speech. There is plenty of objectionable speech that does not fall within this catchment, and that is by design, because the limitation on the freedom of speech should not be taken lightly.
We suspect that the proposed amendment to bylaw 13-050 may impact the right of free expression as protected in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
And I am sad to say that this Canada is no longer the same that I know from 8 years, where everyone has a freedom to express and feel to be heard. I have 2 kids who go to the public school, and being a mother, I am quite worried every morning that my kids are being exposed at the Learning Institute.
Everyone deserves a safe and inclusive space. Thank you to the Region of Waterloo for proposing this bylaw. Yes, this bylaw is not the complete solution, but it is one more tool to combat street harassment and attacks. It is a statement that the region condemns hateful acts. It is a message that the Region of Waterloo is an inclusive community. It is a message that hate has no space in our community.
A lot of people came here to get away from that kind of authoritarian control of voice, speech, and thought, because this does hinder thought. I'm here because I thought there was a problem. I thought there was things to be said about this. And that thought brought me here. But if you hinder my ability to speak, I may as well not even think.
Please seize the opportunity to do the right thing this evening by ratifying this proposed bylaw amendment unanimously. Thank you so much for your time.
The region needs to be prepared for increases in harassment against members of the queer community outside and after the protest. I also think it's important to make a distinction between preserving the right to protest and ensuring appropriate conduct towards others while attending a protest. Simply being at a protest doesn't give someone carte blanche to harass others based on their identity.
I place my confidence in you, our regional councillors, that you will consider the long-term ramifications of this bylaw, that freedom of speech will prevail, and that Canada will remain a country where people of all faiths, cultures, backgrounds will thrive and prosper under the banner of tolerance and respect.
This amendment doesn't mean you can't walk on school property with your insulting t-shirt, or that you can't talk about these issues in public, and it doesn't even stop the protests last week. All it means is that you can't call me a while I walk down the street.
Trans lives will always matter in all circumstances. For a better world, we will have to make together or not at all.
And ultimately, your bylaw does little to protect me when they can simply utter the exact same phrases once I leave your property tonight and go back to my car. The solution to identity politic divides is openness and communication, just as I've extended to all of you tonight. It is not to barricade us further. I see what you're doing and I applaud the effort. I hope that the policy conversations will continue, but please don't pass this bylaw as it currently stands.
And the point I'm trying to make is not that it just limits freedom of expression. That, I think, is obvious. The point is that it limits free expression in a way that is more than necessary to achieve the objective of the bylaw. And for that reason, it is likely to be non-compliant with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
We do not need this amendment to protect people's feelings. We need to protect Canadians' right to speak. For me, for my children, and for Canada, please vote against this amendment. Thank you so much.
But this is going to have the reverse effect that you're asking for. This is going to upset people. This is Canada. They're not ready for this. It's not right. It doesn't look good on you to vote for this.
It's deeply flawed for the reasons I've discussed. It goes too far in limiting the right. And I would urge you to reject it and come up with a better solution to fight the pressing issue of discrimination.
So passionate pleas on both ends of the spectrum, those standing up for freedom of speech and those who would prefer, Waterloo Region to resemble communist China or North Korea when it comes to protests and demonstrations. Right now, I'm going to go back to the studio. We're going to interview Democracy Fund lawyer Alan Honor. He was here tonight. He gave a great presentation, and I'm going to have him weigh in on what he thought about this, free speech attack. Well, folks, knock me down with a feather. The Regional Municipality of Waterloo did indeed vote in favor of amending bylaw 13-050. So, Alan, You gave it your best shot, as did so many other persons standing up for freedom of speech, but it looks like Waterloo's censorious thugs, well, they were the ones triumphant. Your immediate thoughts?
David, I'm not surprised by what we saw yesterday at the Regional Municipality of Waterloo, because we've seen bylaws passed by city councils across this country. They're terrible bylaws. Sometimes, like in the case of Calgary, the bylaw does or at least permits, the exact opposite of what it's intended to achieve. And yesterday, I think we saw that the bylaw that the region of Waterloo passed exceeded its intended purpose. And to me, that's the major flaw with the bylaw.
And you know, Alan, why is it that suddenly municipalities across Canada, you mentioned Calgary, there's also Edmonton, London, why are municipalities which you would think should be concerned about, picking up the trash, fixing potholes, making sure the water is good to drink, why are they getting into the realm of free speech issues in the first place?
Well, that's a great question, David. And the fact is that that's not really part of their mandate to censor speech or to pass anti-speech bylaws. And one of the things that came up yesterday were some of the laws that we already have in place, which would restrict the type of harassment that people might experience on municipal property. You know, for example, we have criminal harassment, but we have less serious crimes like causing a disturbance. And that can capture the sort of scenario when somebody causes a disturbance by using offensive or obscene language. And then at the higher end, we have willful promotion of hatred, we have incitement of hatred. So why are these bylaws required? It's a bylaw passed by a municipality which tries to regulate private conversations. That's how far it goes. If you're on the bus with a friend of yours and you get into a debate, and that debate, maybe at some point you say something that's a little bit offensive to the other person, that can be captured by the bylaw.
And I note that the amendments come into force on January 1st, 2024. Happy New Year. And I see in a press release that you've sent out, the Democracy Fund will consider representing persons charged with this bylaw on a case-by-case basis. I guess that's what we have to wait for. We have to wait for somebody in the region of Waterloo committing a thought crime with an offensive statement, T-shirt, or placard, and then fighting that fine via the Democracy Fund, and maybe then it would be struck down. Would that strike down the entire bylaw, or would the bylaw still be there and it's up to the individual to fight it?
So, it's a really big question, David, and it really depends on how you defend the case, right? And so, sometimes you defend a case on the merits. You say that, the evidence is not there. At other times, you might want to bring a challenge to a court in a superior court of justice, for example, and you could ask them to strike the bylaw under Section 52 of the Charter, and they might just strike part of it. They might strike all of it. I suspect they would just strike the parts that offend the Charter.
Folks, are you as sick and tired of indoctrination over education as we are? Well, if so, please go to our website, stopclassroomgrooming.com. That's stopclassroomgrooming.com. Add your name to our growing petition, and if you're able to, kindly make a donation so we can continue to tell you the other side of the story.